Welcome to the Margaret McLean Show. I'm a former prosecutor and civil trial lawyer and your courtroom translator. My job is to take you behind the scenes and explain the law. So please subscribe to the channel, press the like button, and turn those notifications on. All week, I've been discussing the tremendous fallout from the civil case filed by Karen Reed and her team. She just sued the Massachusetts State Police and the Canton Police Departments after the discovery of text messages exchanged between fired State Trooper Michael Proctor and ex-Canton Sgt. Goode. And they exposed racist, antisemitic, misogynist, anti-gay, and other very hateful text messages. As a result, hundreds of criminal cases could be reopened. I thought the conversation in the last two shows was very enlightening. We discussed the case through the lens of two seasoned defense attorneys, Margaret McLean and Peter Ellikin. Tonight, we're going to get the perspective through the lens of law enforcement. And I really truly believe that the majority of police out there do not share the same level of bias that we saw in those texts. They serve honorably and professionally. The question is how much those attitudes expressed in the text messages impact a criminal investigation. Investigators exercise enormous discretion, and public trust in the justice system depends on confidence that investigations are conducted fairly, objectively, and without bias. So joining me tonight is Todd McGhee. He has his master's in criminal justice and served for 24 years in the Massachusetts State Police. He specializes in national security, violent extremism, active shooter situations, and of course, policing. He's worked with the Department of Homeland Security, and he's been behind the lines keeping us safe for years. He is now a consultant and serves as managing partner of Protecting the Homeland Innovations, LLC. I'm sure you'll all recognize him from TV. He's appeared as an expert on all the channels, and he has been following the Karen Reed case. So, welcome. I am going to bring you up here. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Margaret. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I really have, I appreciate you coming on because I have watched you so many times, and I think that your analysis is always spot on. So,
Thank you. We got a lot to talk about.
oh, we sure do. So I'm going to start with this. As a retired state trooper, it's a big question. What was your reaction when you read that complaint and saw those horrible texts?
Well, Margaret, my first reaction was that this is a person that never should have worn the uniform, let alone a state police uniform, a police uniform, regardless of the agency. Those comments and statements, whether they were text messages or recorded, were an embarrassment. And, you know, it's unfortunate, but oftentimes law enforcement community will take the heat on one bad actor or the one percenters, as I like to say. And there's so many great men and women that wear the uniform each and every day that do the right thing and wouldn't compromise their integrity and wouldn't compromise their character and do their best to represent their agency and protect and serve the way they took their oath of office. And, you know, when you see the fallout from Michael Proctor, you know, it just, there's a blemish on law enforcement that happens.
Yeah, and I do feel bad for all the good members of law enforcement out there. How damaging are revelations like this to the profession as a whole, do you think?
Well, it is damaging, and I think Colonel Noble is doing the best that he can. You know, he's got marching orders from Governor Haley. The phrase I like to use is to get the ship off the rocks and into smooth sailing waters. But you know, you're dealing with the human element, and we humans are not perfect, and so the colonel's going to be responding to situations that arise, as other previous colonels have had to respond to situations as they happen. So, you know, we can only do our best. And again, we've got so many great stories that we can point to. Hopefully, we can bring forward the positive and the good work that is done within the state police and other police agencies to offset some of this negative media that's been prevalent in the news now for a number of years, not just this scenario, but many situations that have happened over the years with different agencies and different police officers.
And if you're Colonel Noble, what would you do?
I would follow suit. He's doing his best to get out in front. He's calling a spade a spade. He didn't mince words in this most recent revelation of Michael Proctor's texts and phone conversations between him and Sergeant Goode, Sergeant Goode from Canton Police Department. So you have to be able to stand tall in the storm and weather the storm as it comes in. And the best way to do that is to be a leader and to take the hits where they come in, and from there have decisive action and not take sidestep some of the different heavy criticism that's coming in, but to take it head on.
Okay. And what is the training like at the state police anyway? I know you were there a while ago, but are you familiar with what their procedures are now?
Yeah, I'm sure they're similar to when I was there. I was on academy staff for various classes, but I was there full time on staff from 2001 until from 1998 to 2001. I put in for a transfer to leave the academy to go to Logan Airport after 9/11, along
Hmm.
with 82 other troopers. So I've had my fair share of state police classes on staff. It's old school. It's in your face. It's highly disciplined, and the training philosophy is stress inoculation. We put the recruits through a series and batteries of testing them to make sure that they can withstand, in a controlled environment, of course, but to make sure that they can withstand some of the rigor that they will face as police officers out in the field. And what differentiates state police from other municipalities is that we ride alone. And we want to make sure that our men and women are prepared and equipped emotionally and mentally and physically to be able to deal with some of the different stressors that they will encounter real time, real world, as they go to work each and every shift, and to be able to perform as professionals out in the real world.
Oh, that's well said. So, as far as back when you were a trooper for 24 years, um, I'm trying to think when cell phones came in, but now personal cell phones they're discoverable. And what do you think about that? How should the personal cell phones of officers be policed? What do you
Well,
think?
even Margaret, even more reason to be more discerning about what you put on your personal cell phone.
Hmm.
And I when I was at Logan Airport, I had a job phone and I had a personal phone. So none of my personal communications went on my job phone. But even with that, my personal phones, we have policy, we had rules and regulations within the state police that state police business is to stay confidential. Any
Yes.
any deviation from that is a violation, and you're subject to being disciplined. So you knew that, whether you had a job phone and your personal phone, you knew that based on the rules and regulations, and you were to conduct yourself accordingly.
Right. And as far as the Karen Reed investigation, those they broke those rules.
100%.
Yeah.
In not just, the vulgar, vile um, context that was put out between Proctor and sharing information with his friends, with Sean Goode. That's one thing. But
Mhm.
even releasing any information to his friends is also in violation of those rules and regulations. So not only the lack of professional, but also violated significant department policies and procedures.
Should he have been fired earlier when that was first discovered, do you think?
Uh, Absolutely, but I think it's fair to say that there are some political wins that were probably involved in this
Mhm.
case. You had Michael Morrissey, who's a prominent district attorney within the state. I'm not privy to what any back room or email communications may have been, but I can only imagine that the DA's office may have had some influence into slowing down that disciplinary action. And if we
Mhm.
think back to trial one, you know, when was Proctor finally disciplined? Right, it went through the full, complete trial before the state police made that announcement.
Right. I don't think they wanted it to affect the trial.
I think you're spot on with that.
Mhm. So what safeguards exist to prevent personal beliefs from affecting investigations? I'd like to know
There,
that.
there really are none. And you swear you're in your oath of office to be a professional, and so therefore you are expected to conduct yourself as such. There are guidelines within our rules and regulations that that you are to follow as an active duty state police officer. And when you step outside of those guidelines and those boundaries, you're the only one that is holding yourself accountable until
Mhm.
you step on the line. And then, of course, your supervisors are the next layer that are supposed to step in and hold you accountable based on what level of violation has occurred.
Okay. And talking about speaking of the office environment at the DA's office, uh, what about Proctor's supervisor, Buchanan? Do you think he should have known that Proctor had these biases?
The bias in the vile nature and the crude nature of what Proctor put in those communications, I don't know how you could keep that biasness to yourself. Something along the way had to slip. And as a coworker and as an immediate supervisor, Sergeant Buchanan had to have heard something.
Yeah,
Lieutenant Tully had to have heard something coming from their subordinate that just didn't sit right. And I just it behooves me that it came up within the complaint that
mm,
his evaluation was had stated exceeds in a number of different areas. I just can't imagine that those communications or that style or his vernacular didn't come up in some type of you know informal conversation that would have raised an eyebrow. I'm having a hard time with that.
I am
So
too.
there's now a scenario where you have a failure to supervise, and so
Mhm.
now you've seen that the DA's office was cleared out. Buchanan and Tully no longer, and Tully's retired, but both of them
Yeah.
were removed from that office.
Oh, I know it. I know it. And for me, it's hard to believe based on reading. It's just awful how racist, especially racist. I mean, leaving that the starts right out with the accident where it's like, oh, let him die.
Yeah,
Uh,
it
uh,
makes you wonder how
cringy.
a person would choose a profession with those types of biases. And it's not against the law to have those biases, but it's certainly against moral character for
Hmm.
someone to um, have an opinion that way against just general members of the general public. I just, if you weren't a white male, he had something
Right.
derogatory, biased, anti-Semitic, racist, misogynist to say about, a good majority of our population.
Yeah, I know it. And I'm just wondering if there's any way training or some there is going to be changed in the future so that supervisors are expected to identify these warning signs or red flags. Like, what would you look for?
That's a layer of that level of accountability. But I,
Hmm.
I I think people eventually, over time, their character shows who they are.
Yeah,
They're either a stand-up person or they're not. And if they're
right.
not, I've got to believe that if you're paying attention, they're really going to show you their true selves. The nature of law enforcement, you come across people in their worst moments, and you have an opportunity, not that you have to go out of your way to help someone, but you don't have to go out of your way to hurt someone either. And it just
Right.
seems that in the Karen Reed case, they closed off every other scenario and they were dead set against Karen Reed in that she indeed was going to be the one that they were going to bring prosecution. Hell or high water, she was going to be the one that they were going to bring prosecution against.
And that shows investigator bias.
100%. It shows that investigative bias, which again was one of the charges held against Proctor in this termination, in this trial board, for bias policing. That's also in our rules and regulations. You can't do it. There's no room for it.
Right. So one allegation in the lawsuit is that this reflects a broader culture. I mean, how do you distinguish between individual misconduct and institutional culture? And do you agree with that?
Well, I don't agree with it from the perspective of, I know hundreds of men and women still within the state police that do the right thing, that put on the uniform and they come to work and they would never ever find themselves in this predicament. But that being said, you have to investigate it. You have to peel back the layers and you have to look under those layers and see where else does it exist. Does it exist exclusively with Michael Proctor? I'm not naive to say that. There are others, again, we're talking with human nature. There are others within the department that this needs to be uncovered. But again, is it systemic? I don't believe so.
And I don't mean to pick on the state police because obviously Sean Goode's from the Canton Police Department, but it really, as a citizen of Massachusetts, it makes you think. I, I did not see this when I was a prosecutor, and I have many, many police officers who I've come in contact with, I'm friends with. I was just shocked. I mean, um, what message should department leaders be sending out right now? And I know you talked about Colonel Noble, but what about across the state? Should other police departments be sending out messages as well?
It would behoove other agencies in the Commonwealth to be able to learn from the shortcomings of the state police, things that were not addressed. Take the
Hmm.
high road, get out in front of this, address your supervisors, have them tune their ear and sharpen their lens to be able to pick up on these types of unwanted conduct. And your department is going to be that much more professional. And let's be honest, save yourself the embarrassment.
Mm. Yeah. So I used to teach at law at Boston College, and one of the sections was ethics, and I always refer to the front page of the newspaper test, right? So is it ethical behavior? Well, you don't want to picture yourself on the front page of the newspaper someday, right?
That's where it's gonna it's right where it's gonna end up. And
Yeah.
and once you're there, how do you save face? Once you're there with those headlines, that's
Hmm.
that's a difficult story to try to uh, massage or to lend yourself back favorable in the public eye. Very, very difficult.
Oh, it is. I mean, once you're blemished like that. Now, should departments revisit training and supervision policies, do you think?
Yeah, I think you're going to see that, Margaret. I think you're going to see additional training, and if nothing else, for liability protection. That as a result of a high profile case like this, the agency took these steps and these measures to be more professional. So yeah, I think by default you're going to see
Mhm.
new training standards come out for frontline officers as well as supervisors.
Yeah. And where do you think this story goes next? What do you think? What's
I don't think we've heard it all.
I don't
I
either.
think if I had to be a betting man, Alan Jackson has some more fodder in his sleeve, and he's going to load up that cannon. We need to hear what's, I believe, the first date that's available is June 14th for this
Mhm.
deposition, and
Mhm.
I think you're going to hear more things come out in that deposition above and beyond what was put in the complaint.
Yeah. Do you think they should have made him show up for the deposition? And we're talking about Proctor's deposition was scheduled for this past Monday, and on Friday, his attorney notified the other side that he couldn't do it because we don't know why, but we're guessing it's some sort of mental health issue.
Hard to say.
Yeah.
We may not like who the players are, but if there's a legitimate reason, then so be it. They're gonna use and leverage whatever they can. But the judge I think, found what was a reasonable time to be able to not prolong the deposition, but to keep things on track and
Right.
for both sides to find a mutual convenient date.
Right. And if you watch that hearing, the judge also pointed out that it seemed a little strategic that this lawsuit was filed several days, or I think even maybe 4 days before that deposition was scheduled. So all of a sudden, all the Proctor texts come out and everything. Perhaps, they just weren't prepared for that. Do you think that was strategic?
I think there was some gamesmanship that was happening there. I
Hmm.
think that's fair to say.
Hmm.
And it's things play themselves out, and both sides are going to leverage whatever they have available to them. And so, I mean, I don't fault them. If there's a way to be able to, you know, pull the strings back in your favor, then that's what happens. You know better than I in the courtroom how those types of things may play out.
Yeah, I see a lot of strategy going on here. So, is there anything else you'd like to add on Karen Reed? Because I want to also pick your brain on the World Cup and security.
Well, as far as the Karen Reed trial, there's a lot more that we'll come to discover. Also keep in mind you've got the different restaurants that are in these lawsuits as well. We'll probably
Hmm.
hear more from their attorneys. Um, we also
Oh, yeah.
need to understand, how many other individuals are going to be deposed. You've got, the family members, in Canton there that are probably going to be pulled into a deposition. You've
Yep.
got Higgins, the ATF agent.
Yep.
A lot of these people did not get pulled into the second trial to testify. But I think here in the deposition phase of these new lawsuits, I think you can see a lot of old names resurface to
Oh,
testify.
yeah. Yeah, we have 4 lawsuits going on, which I discussed in the previous show. But I know I forgot to ask you this. What about criminal culpability as far as Proctor and possibly Good? Do you see criminal charges down the road and maybe on the federal level, obstruction of justice, anything like that?
I see. I don't think the feds are gone. We know that it's because of the federal investigation that really um, highlighted the use of the cell phone, and that there was, some damaging content that was there.
Hmm.
I've said all along that you might see violations of Fourth and 14th Amendment.
Hmm.
So illegal seizure of Karen Reed, an illegal arrest. You may see, due process challenges by her attorneys in the 14th Amendment, and so
Hmm.
I think that is, I think a federal um, level of prosecution is not too far remotely removed from this conversation.
Right, right. And just talking to people this weekend, the biggest question I people asked me was, He should be in jail. Is he? This guy should be in jail." Of course, people were just so offended by the text messages. They're like, "Is there any culpability?" And so, uh, it's likely what you said, or obstruction of justice, or something like that. So,
Yeah, and it would have to come on the federal level.
yeah.
It's again, it's unfortunate, but the accountability happens within the agency. He wasn't suspended as a final disposition. He was suspended and then terminated. And so,
Hmm.
and people, and I want to set the record straight for your viewers, Margaret. Proctor is not getting a pension.
Good.
The law says that a Massachusetts state trooper must complete 20 years of service before they're eligible. He did not have 20 years of service. So there is nowhere within the state system that he would be able to collect a pension now or into the future. Whether he was terminated, whether he was arrested, served jail time, period. The end. He is not drawing from the pension system as a civilian now.
That's good to know. That's good. If I were him, I'd leave the country.
Oh, well,
Seriously.
it's he's dug himself in quite the hole, and
Yeah.
again, we'll see how all this plays out, but not an envious position to be in.
No. No. So let's talk World Cup. Let's change. I'd like to pick your brain on your expertise. So this is a big event. It's approaching soon. What would you do as far as security?
Well, I think here, speaking more locally, where Gillette Stadium is one of the host cities, you're going to see a massive, massive show of law enforcement, and that will be supplemented by private security. But we also need to leverage intelligence. We need to leverage intelligence not just nationally, but internationally. What are the threats that other countries have seen, if any, that have been focused and targeted towards the soccer and football, as they call it? But what types of threats have happened in Europe? What types of threats have happened in different part Latin America, different parts where we know that the main sport is soccer, is football. So that's just one layer. Next, you need to have your communications. What level of communications are you going to have? We call that interoperability. What level of interoperability is going to happen amongst the different various agencies that are working these events around the country? Also, what type of technology is going to be used? And then keep in mind that most of, if not all of these stadiums are open air stadiums. So now you have to conduct no-fly zones so that you don't have any type of drone incursions or any type of drone weaponization that can harm the fans and the players on the field. And so it's just, again, a significant, a massive lift for security to keep individuals safe. And I'll add that that security zone really needs to extend itself. Think about, for Gillette, all the different parking lot areas. Think of all the
Yeah.
tailgating that will be happening. But those are fans that are vulnerable, to bad actors.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to say that anywhere where there are large crowds gathered doesn't necessarily have to be inside of a venue. It can be adjacent to the venue. That's a perfect target for bad actors.
How do you prevent that?
Show of force. You have to show a hardened target for what we would call soft targets. You need to make sure that anyone with bad intentions will be discovered. They'll be identified and captured and brought under arrest in the event that they try anything that violates public order, that violates the law. That's the best way to be able to have a large show of force, show of masses, heavy, heavy uniform presence. But that's not enough. You need the intelligence so that law enforcement can get out in front of any type of bad intentions that's happening, either through social media channels, through intelligence, something that's happened again from out of country that could spill over into the U.S. games.
Oh, that is massive. I mean, they must have been. How long do you think they've been working on this?
I haven't been privy to any behind the scenes meetings, but I believe they were minimum 16 to 18 months out from this month and saying, okay, what are we going to do? What's security going to look like? What do we anticipate? What does transportation look like? How do we secure the lodging? We already know that we don't have enough hotel space for all of the fans that are coming into our area, let alone other states around the country that are
Mhm.
city hosts for the games. So just a massive, massive uplift when you start thinking about all the different layers that are going to take place in such a global event like this.
Oh, yeah. How many agencies will be involved?
I'm not
I mean
sure, but you can
I
anticipate
mean,
that the
yeah, like
spillover of other municipal agencies will support the efforts at Gillette Stadium. Not to mention,
mhm.
you'll have your federal agencies that will support, as well as National Guard.
Okay. So they'll just and, how I guess I'm still confused as to how you police the parking lots. Like,
Yeah,
I
you're gonna have to have that uniform presence there. As we
yeah,
know, the roadway leading
yeah.
into Gillette is usually saturated with state police. But again, you're going to have not enough personnel, so you need the support of outside agencies to be able to support all the different posts that are going to be
Yeah.
needed to secure the event.
Wow. Yeah, that's massive. So, I also wanted to briefly talk to you about, I saw that you had watched, people are interested in The Crash, that Netflix show. And I have to look at her, put my glasses on, McKenzie Sharilla case. So,
Yes.
what are your thoughts on that? And then I'll tell you what my thoughts are.
Yeah, I initially, thinking about the charge of murder, well, first of all, I thought the documentary was well done. Um, you know, Such a sad story for the two young men, the boyfriend Dominic and the good
Mhm.
friend Davion, that were killed in that incident. Um, Looking through that case through Massachusetts law, I thought initially she may have been overcharged, and
Mhm.
I thought maybe manslaughter would have been a more appropriate charge. But it's an Ohio case, and it happened with different rules and different legal analysis being applied. So again, the prosecutor felt extremely confident in those charges that were brought against her, and ultimately was able to secure a verdict against
Yeah.
McKenzie. But again, I thought proving intent would have been a challenge in this particular case. I thought that um, you know she lived her life in that social media world, and I think if you also looked at the parents allowed her to live a life without consequences, and
Yeah.
I think that really um, helped shape the personality that she was, and that sense of entitlement, if you will. The
Mhm.
drug abuse that was between the weed and between the psychedelics, that had to be a
Yeah.
factor.
Yes.
I'm not a psychologist, but or medical professional, but I can only hope that the amount of drugs that she was doing lended something unfavorable to her.
Yeah, and I think the amount of drugs over time is what did it too, because we were talking earlier about marijuana being so strong. It's different than the marijuana 20 years ago. So, and that stays in your system. I believe if there's a drug test, right, it stays in the system a month and a half or something. So,
Yeah,
something like that.
as we were talking offline,
Yeah.
the weed that was around, back when I was growing up, I think it's a completely different product today.
Mhm.
Vaping wasn't around, and I think the product that's on the market today that's been legalized is mostly chemical. And
Yeah.
I'm confident someone's going to do a study, if it hasn't been done already, on the dangers to the human brain,
Yeah.
especially to your earlier point, Margaret, about
Yeah.
drug abuse early in one's age, and
Mhm.
also the amount of what a person partakes in.
Exactly. And there were no consequences for her. Um, and I think it does impact the judgment of a young mind, between the psychedelics and the weed, to the point where in social media, that's a problem too. Constantly posting, look at me. So, very narcissistic behavior, which I think ultimately led to that crash, which is just stunningly sad. And talk about overcharging. I do agree with you, and I think that that is an issue with DA's office. Like, look at Karen Reed. I always thought she was overcharged and should not have been charged with second degree murder, but maybe voluntary manslaughter or something like that.
Yeah, and that's a layer. I always, from a law enforcement perspective, any investigation, um, it starts with good policing out in the field,
Hmm.
post incident, and then whatever evidence has been identified and logged and brought to court, and brought in as evidence. It all starts in the field,
Yeah.
and the prosecution is only as good as the law enforcement investigation. So,
Hmm.
in all of these different matters, whether it's the trial of Karen Reed, around John O'Keefe's murder, or something like this, where we see really a young teenager out of control, and ends up being so reckless,
Mm.
kills two very close dear friends of hers.
Yeah, that certainly was reckless. She had her foot on the pedal. She was going 100 miles an hour, 110, and at 4 in the morning, straight into a brick wall. Which I'm surprised she didn't kill herself too. Maybe that was the intent, to kill all three of them.
I don't think her that underdeveloped brain in never having what appeared to be having a sense of consequences in her life.
Hmm.
I don't think she could differentiate between a 35-mile-an-hour collision or a 100-mile-an-hour collision.
Yeah,
Her undeveloped brain just didn't get her to the other side of that scenario. And so
right.
whatever was going to happen was going to happen. I'm going to get my way, and hell or high water. My boyfriend's going to once again, you know, follow my way, follow the things that I want, cave
Mhm.
into my demands.
Right.
But again, just extremely reckless.
Extremely reckless and selfish, and very sad, and very sad looking at the families. But I still feel that the parents of the girl are Mackenzie are in denial to this day. They still can't. They still don't think she's culpable. She's never
Margaret,
done anything wrong.
towards the end, I thought it was extremely interesting how when Mackenzie's mother came before the court to speak whatever she was going to speak and make a statement, the judge cut her off and said, I'm not hearing anything about the victims. I'm only
Right.
hearing, right? I mean, the judge cut her right off.
Yeah.
And so, again, to your point, you could hear how the mother was again creating excuses. That was it, POTS diagnosis. That's not even appropriate.
No, I
Watching
don't even know what
that
that is.
documentary, it was if they were trying to throw anything against the wall that was
Yeah.
gonna stick,
Right.
and it didn't work.
No, definitely not. And I thought that was an interesting decision. They chose a judge trial, a bench trial instead of a jury. Do you think it would have been different in front of a jury?
Great question. I really believe a jury probably would have, if not found, and again, I don't know Ohio law, but
Yeah,
if they
me
didn't
either.
find her guilty on the murder, then maybe a lesser included charge, but I think they would have found her guilty of something.
Yeah, because I just thought the prosecution did a good job playing all those, the Instagram and all the social media stuff that she had out there, and it just made her look so bad. You didn't want to there's nothing likable about that.
No, she was not a likable, defendant,
Yeah.
and, the even post-incident, her behavior, there was a name of a group that she was following, very dark,
Oh,
like
yeah.
you couldn't choose another entertainer or influencer to
Right.
to get behind. Just again, it was as if she hadn't matured from such a traumatic incident and just wanted to continue living that narcissistic life.
Yeah, and now, of course, online, there's a big push, just like free Karen Reed, free Mackenzie. Come on. I don't know.
Yeah, you're gonna and we can add, Luigi Mangione to that as well, right, Margaret?
Yeah, I know, I
Uh,
know. Well, yeah, we can. Yeah, exactly.
it's just again, you're gonna have a segment of the population that is gonna side, with people that have, got caught up in the criminal justice system, one reason or another, and
Mhm.
it's incredible. It's absolutely
I know,
incredible to see these things play out.
I know. Do you think cameras should be in the courtroom? Because that made me Mangione just made me think of that, 'cause no cameras.
I do. I really believe that these trials are part of the public good, part of the public interest, and we saw in the Karen Reed trial, the turnout at each court date, and you
Yeah.
have to manage it. But I think that when you have such a tremendous incident happen in your community. That's I think it's Storysville, Ohio, where McKenzie Sharilla, this incident happened. It's a community of about 45,000, so it's a mid-size city,
Mhm.
and but the police department's only about 70 police officers, So
Yeah,
it's Middletown, Middle City, USA.
it
And
is.
those communities, they have a vested interest in wanting to know what's going on.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good way of looking at it. I go both ways. Of course, I want cameras in the courtroom so I can cover a trial, but that's selfish of me. But sometimes you think, is it too much of a media circus? So I don't know. But New York
And
State, no cameras, so that'll or
yeah.
federal court.
And the media again is gonna cover, the different aspects. What I like
Mhm.
is that you're seeing it directly the way it played out, and you're not getting a
Mhm.
spin, you're not getting,
Right.
maybe a network's perspective or slant, maybe
True.
because for one reason or another, they don't like the defendant, or they don't like,
Mhm.
the way the nature of the story played itself out, so I just like that very transparent perspective.
Yeah, and I do think with when they do have cameras in the courtroom, we have legal analysis, and it's interesting to hear. For example, I enjoyed watching what you had to say on Canton Confidential, the various stations. So it makes you think twice, and everyone to think twice about the law and perhaps learn something as well. So,
Well, yes, you mentioned earlier having, Mojiera on your
hmm
channel as well as, Peter
hmm
Eloquin.
yeah,
Both terrific lawyers. They both
yes,
are professional. They're both practitioners.
hmm
They when they provide their analysis, it's coming from a place of experience, and it's coming from a real place of,
hmm
this is what I would do, or this is what happened in a previous case. They've got such tremendous experience
oh
that
yeah,
they can
yeah,
share that with lay people that don't understand how the court system works, or how the legalese of things work in a trial. So again,
yeah,
that's just next level
hmm oh
of
yeah,
information that people
yeah.
can take away, as they watch these different, your channel and other podcasters.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed being on with Morgietta. The two of us would be on quite a bit together. And of course, Peter liked to talk. So when I was on with him, I'm like, Peter, let me get a word in. But it's he's very smart. Both of them were excellent, and they were excellent guests, just like you. So
I was, I shared some time with Morgietta on her very first appearance on Canton Confidential, and,
ooh,
at the end of it, I said, "They're gonna be calling you all the time."
oh yeah, she's
Yeah,
excellent, and
yeah,
she's
she
just
really
so
is.
likable too.
Yeah.
She's a fun guest to have on my show and to you know, sitting next to and chatting after with. So I really enjoy her. She's wonderful. But well, thank you very much. I don't want to take any more of your time. You've been very enlightening to everyone on the channel, and this will live on my channel, of course. So I really appreciate it. All of your
Margaret,
insight.
thank you for the invite. It was a pleasure. And as these stories develop, they're not gonna go away, as we see, at least in the Karen Reed, saga. So
Right.
happy to come back on and share some more of my thoughts.
Oh, thank you so much. And you're so articulate. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Well, have a great night. And everybody out there, thank you for watching The Margaret McLean Show.